Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm the Director of Product Marketing in VMware for our cloud providers, and delighted to be joined again today by Laurent. So Laurent, welcome back to Feature Fridays. Can you just introduce yourself and tell people what you do and who you are in VMware?
Hello, I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I'm Laurent Allard, and I'm leading the Sovereign Cloud program for EMEA, and does cover all of the business that we are developing on Sovereign Cloud. And this is a great opportunity today to share the content with you.
Excellent. Thanks, Laurent. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So the reason for today's kind of Sovereign Cloud refresh is that obviously Sovereign Cloud is a very, very important program. We're seeing enormous growth in our Sovereign Cloud base. It's becoming more and more of a priority as cloud providers and customers are starting to see the impacts of security issues, ransomware, geopolitical tensions, and really Sovereign Cloud addresses a lot of those areas and much more. So today we're going to do a bit of a refresh around the messaging to just discuss in more detail the scope of Sovereign Cloud and how Sovereign Cloud works together with cloud environments, with customers, and with partners. So Laurent, I'll just hand it over to you if you want to start the ball rolling.
Great. So let's first position the Sovereign Cloud clearly as a key component of the overall cloud journey. So the cloud, as we all know, is a growing business. And our forecast by 2027 is that around a quarter, 25% of the total cloud in EMEA will be tied to the sovereignty requirements, which translates in our business landscape of potentially an $8 billion of market opportunity. So it's a very sizable business opportunity that we are talking here today, but as part of the overall cloud adoption. So cloud is growing fast, but the requirement for not only cloud, but Sovereign Cloud is becoming very concrete and very sizable.
I think, sorry, when I look at those numbers, I'm not surprised, but I'm kind of in awe of how this market is growing in EMEA particularly. And there's regulatory changes going on all the time in individual nations and, of course, in the EU. And keeping up with those from a customer's perspective is a very hard task to do, and understanding how they impact your organization. And this is where our cloud providers can help, right, Laurent?
Oh yes, because this is a complex topic, and we see more and more an issue that our client is facing is, in one hand, our clients, and we'll speak a little bit more later about who are the clients, but overall it's public sectors and regulated sectors who have a lot of pressure on innovation, but at the same time, they have a huge agenda on risk management, mitigation of new risk, and all of these drivers for Sovereign Cloud will lead to this increase of demand for Sovereign Cloud. So let's take a little bit of analysis and look on what are the key drivers which will translate to an increase of demand for Sovereign Cloud. One is clearly, it's quite new, it's the geopolitical environment, and it will drive a series of RFP, a series of investment from public sectors in Europe to transform this situation of at risk vis-à-vis the resiliency, to keep control of their data with respect of the requirement for sovereignty. So a lot of different demands, a lot of different use cases will happen on this front. There is another consideration which is a given, but it's still there, it's cyber. Cyber, when you have your own data as a strategic asset for your business, cyber is a risk for your business. And the board is considering now that the sovereignty of their business and government, the sovereignty of the nation with respect of the digital economy we are in, required to manage the data in a very protected way. There is also a huge consideration of the diversity of data. And we have seen different types of data. We have seen informal data with collaboration tools. We have seen legacy data with different systems which was not totally aligned on what is needed to transform this data in knowledge for the innovation agenda. So all of these unstructured data, different type of data, will translate also to a series of requirements of critical data or less critical data with respect of the classification. We have also the regulation, and regulation is very active in Europe. And we see an increase of regulation framework, not only at state or European Union level, but also at different sectors. We have regulation for finance, for example, DORA. We have the regulation for health. We have regulation for very secure data like SecNumCloud or C5, etc., and more to come. And last but not least, is all of that is in a context where the data is exponentially growing every single year, 23% of growth year on year. So it's complex today, but it will be more complex tomorrow. So we need to act. And this is a picture of the key drivers, which are very factual, and we can engage discussion with our client on this mitigation and responses we can deliver to address these challenges.
Yeah, and I think from an overall picture, I mean, these are very much some of the core drivers here. From an overall picture, though, in terms of the, we've talked a lot about data, right? Sovereign cloud is, very, very focused on data and data classification, data jurisdictional control, and everything we're going to talk about today. When you consider from a platform distribution perspective where your data is, the real kind of realization that's coming out now is that a huge amount of European data is held outside of Europe, held in large US-run hyperscalers, for example. And when you're talking about data driving your national economy and in your national interest, that presents a real problem because you're unable to take advantage of that data to the way you would like to. I think that's a key point for especially when your customers, our cloud providers' customers, are government entities. Most government entities are fairly behind in their IT approach, and they need to modernize. Now, when you list out all of these drivers here, and then you put the challenge that most government entities have today, which is around cost, resources, management of the resources, and try and innovate into that sovereign data world where you want to monetize your data and provide that modernization and all of the new platforms, it becomes a real challenge for a government entity to try and do that. Keeping their head above water normally is problem enough. And now we're saying that keeping your head above water isn't enough. You've got to have your data in your national jurisdiction. That could be an issue. You've got to understand your data classification. That's definitely an issue for lots of organizations. And then you've got to secure it and do everything else around the data. And that becomes somewhere where I think our cloud providers, our sovereign cloud providers, are excelling in not just providing a sovereign platform, but also providing sovereign managed services to these customers.
Yeah. So I think the key point we need to start with is it's not a one-size-fits-all issue. And we need, with a large consideration of what is data, we need to reclassify according to how critical is the data for your business. And in general, it's best practice. We see three categories of data. We see data which are absolutely confidential at a level we call restricted. And what means restricted? If the data is exposed elsewhere by competitors, an external country, government, whatever, there is a real critical risk for the continuity of the activity of this country or of the business because it will impact. It's totally restricted. The second level is confidential. If there is somewhere a leakage, if there is accessibility and out of control, it will impact the business. It's sizable, but it will impact, but not as critical as restricted. And the third level is everything you will consider as your asset, you want to protect because it's your IP. You want to keep ownership of this data, but you agree to expose at a certain point because you want AI, you want sharing of data with new ecosystem, etc. And this is what we'll call protected. So it's all about choice and control. For each category of data, what is the right solution which works for the best for the solution? for my data classification. So this is very important to keep this element in mind, that when you see from competitors and from some of the hyperscalers a one-size-fits-all story, it's not, because the problem is not a single group of data. You have multiple, and where the multi-cloud story, and will come in the architectural later on in this call, when the multi-cloud story is coming, is clearly a unique solution, but it's all about choice and control. And maybe I will take 2 words on the an opportunity to highlight two words about this concept of different data versus the solutions that we call trusted cloud versus sovereign cloud. So the sovereignty, data sovereignty, is where we are focusing the most. The consideration of digital sovereignty as a strategic objective is something which is important to understand, but it's very high level. It's global for European unions, or it's global for a country, and it will translate to a series of rules and regulation which will apply on the geography, like Data Act or Digital Marketing Act, etc. We have a very clear focus on data sovereignty, because this is where the very specific certification will come to the different category of data. And when we go to a critical data for health, HIPAA, HTS in France, is becoming critical. When you go to payment, PCI DSS is critical. DORA for finance, SecLink Cloud, etc. And this is where residency of the data, protection of the data, interoperability and portability are clearly the attributes, and will come later on how we implement these attributes. Classify for the most restricted, what are the absolute necessity to be totally aligned with the top criteria of residency, protection, interoperability, portability. And this is what we call sovereign cloud. And we can have a dedicated implementation or a shared implementation in sovereign cloud. And when we go to a level of, yes, it's local, it's protected, but exposure to Cloud Act still exists. It's more for the third category of data, which is protected. In that case, we are talking about trusted. So sovereign cloud is the terminology we use for the most critical data, restricted and confidential. And trusted cloud is the terminology we use for the most, the solution adapted for the protected group of data.
Okay, yeah, so that's really interesting. And I guess one of the things, going back a few slides, is that partners and customers, when looking at this is not a point in time fix. This is a fix whilst data grows in volume, that they're going to have to keep compliant, keep reporting on, and keep up with legislative controls.
Yes. And maybe we can introduce the concept of the maturity models that we have developed. When you start at company level, at public sector administration level, you start from the initial level, which is sovereignty is somewhere in the buzzword, but I don't have a specific ongoing action on this specific strategic objective. And this is where a significant part of our clients are today. They have heard about it, they are talking about it, but they have not engaged a specific program. The next level is opportunistic, and this is where a starting of consideration of critical data has been identified, and for this specific silo, specific group, they have a specific solution. It's opportunistic to a first of a kind of a group of data, critical, which is isolated in a particular solution. Mm-hmm. There is no interoperability and not portability, but it's a first kind of development of sovereign cloud. The third level is very much the pivot, the transition from starting of understanding, starting of deployment to a complete understanding and comprehensive view of what it is in terms of needs. You have the data classification clearly defined. And from this data classification, you can define your cloud strategy, how I'm going to address the different needs. And this is, unfortunately, limited in terms of volume of client, a level which is limited to a few public sectors And I can use the example of the RFP in Italy as a reference of a well-defined statement of how the data classification are and how the architecture for sovereign cloud need to be. And from this point, you have two steps, measure and optimize, to deploy partially and totally this holistic approach on sovereign cloud. So this curve of what you call a maturity model for data sovereignty is very easy to understand, very easy to use when you engage to an individual client to say, dear client, where are you in this journey? And from where we are, what is the roadmap? How we can help? Because we are the solutions.
Yeah, and cloud providers, certainly the sovereign cloud providers I speak to, they help customers with that data classification exercise by doing, data classification assessment for the customer and understanding the data landscape within the customer. And that's something that a lot of customers struggle with, particularly with the growth in data, growth in new projects, and generally, keeping up with IT and cloud has been a challenge for most. Now you're adding data classification and ongoing measurement of that classification, compliance against that classification. It means new tools, new processes, and often that's something they need a partner to come in and assist with.
Oh yes, yeah. And maybe it's time to move to a little bit of understanding of what's in terms of value proposition and understand sure. the content. So I'm going to give you first an overview of what it is in terms of solution, because yes, we can absolutely help our clients to move on sovereignty. Who are the clients? We have identified three main groups of clients. The core government, defense, justice, interior, that's a group very demanding on highly protected set of capabilities because they have a lot of restricted data and confidential data. Mm-hmm. The second group is other public sectors. There are still some very concrete consideration for confidential data, but they have also a part of their needs which is open to new ecosystem because they need to modernize the way we deliver services in the country to the citizen, to the local activities and so on. So there is a need of modernization and a need of mix between innovation and protection, which is very specific to the other public sectors. And the third group is what we call the regulated private sectors, finance, health, critical infrastructure, where regulation is moving fast and they need to comply with this regulation framework and the different certification requirement, etc., that they have to follow in their different geography. So these are the three main groups. And what are the use cases? They have a combination of modernization of the infrastructure because the legacy is not adapted to be transformed on the cloud for innovation. So modernization is one. Innovation and building new services is second one. And when you have this bunker of existing and new application, new assets, you need also to guarantee that end-to-end, you have control of how you give access to this asset. Because if you have a bunker but no doors, and if it's an open bar type of approach, it will not work with sovereignty. So that's use case according to the three groups of clients that we are targeting. So the core in green on this chart, the core of the value proposition is about the multi-cloud. Because as I've said, we have three categories of data: the restricted, the confidential, the protected. And for each, we see a great story that we can deliver with our capabilities. And you are in absolutely unique position to deliver not only a significant part of the infrastructure solution, but also the overall management, because all of that at client level need to be integrated. It is one client story, included the part of the Tanzu, included the different accessibility, intrasec security. So this is the core of the value proposition.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the multi-cloud, so you've got the three distinct areas there. So dedicated cloud, possibly air-gapped, maybe 100% isolated. That is really for your 100% restricted data. It must not come out of that environment. Then your sovereign public cloud. So that could be a cloud verified VMware Cloud Foundation instance, or VX Rails or some sort of hyper-converged box, but fundamentally running the VCF footprint. And then you move into this sovereign public cloud, and this is where our cloud verified partners who are delivering cloud verified solutions today and delivering sovereign aligned solutions that meet our sovereign cloud criteria, they can self-attest to the services they provide on top of that, because it's not just about the infrastructure that we provide, it's about all of the processes and applications and legal controls and everything else that the cloud provider has. They can deliver a sovereign public cloud. So same kind of experience as a public cloud for a government entity, for example, in terms of on-demand and UI and access and scalability and all those things. But that's now in a a secure sovereign cloud environment. Perhaps in the UK, for example, some of our sovereign cloud providers are on dedicated government campuses with dedicated government data centers behind gates with guards, perhaps. But this is giving those three sectors that you identified, government, public sector, and regulated private sector, is giving them that ability to utilize a private cloud experience in a secure sovereign cloud way.
Absolutely.
And I think the important thing that we've added on to this recently is the trusted public cloud. And you're absolutely right, aligning that to the data classification. This is for protected data and data that you'll potentially interop with other businesses and monetize. And this is where the hyperscaler clouds come in, the trusted hyperscaler clouds who attest to some of the sovereign cloud principles, but certainly not all of them. So data now, we have this lovely multi-cloud picture where a sovereign cloud requirement can be met by our VCPP partners who are sovereign cloud attested, and the utilization of their in data center infrastructure, their private infrastructure, their shared infrastructure, but also the relationships they have with trusted hyperscale providers can now be kind of pulled together in that intrinsic security and footprint that we are looking at here from a reference architecture perspective.
Yeah. This is perfectly the opportunities that we are focusing. The important point is to go out of the basic discussions that we have seen in the press for the last few months, which is 100% need to be European based, and hyperscalers are out of the game, or hyperscalers are now with a new development, new implementation of a new region in a country in a position to deliver all of the services needed for a particular country. And the black or white discussion does not work, because data classification is not black or white. And we need to be equipped with our customers, with our executive partners to say how we can restart from the problem statement. A problem statement is that there is this dual agenda with dilemma of innovation and better security, better protection on sovereignty of the data. And data is a new strategic asset with a view of data is not a one single element with one single classification. We have three main categories. And with that, we can integrate in the model under control how we want to deal with the part which is eligible for hyperscalers versus the part which is not eligible, and in an integrated way. And the capacity hardware that we need to consider overall required to combine all of this capability in an integrated model. We can't say we exclude, and we can't say it's fully adapted. Let's have this multi-cloud approach to address the real problem, which is it's a multi-cloud story. It's not a single cloud, it's multi-cloud story. And we have the capability not only to deliver the different capability with our partners, but also to manage in an integrated way.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic opportunity for our cloud providers who are today, delivering those sovereign services in their data centers, but also, as all cloud providers do, have the relationships with the hyperscalers. What we're clearly saying here is that hyperscale providers have their place in a sovereign cloud environment, but it's to do with, it's not just any place, it has to be centered around the data classification requirements.
So if we look at maybe to focus now on what are the added value with this clear understanding of the objective and opportunity that we have for our partners. If you want to highlight what it is in terms of concrete differentiator for this story with our VCPP partner, we have a unique opportunity to deliver business because of these four key elements. One is no exposure to Cloud Act. We can guarantee that the local, restricted and confidential implementation of the solution, you can deliver a solution which is not exposed to Cloud Act. And it's absolutely spot on for the restricted and confidential. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can, second, deliver a solution with your partners based on the trust that you have already developed in the past. And trust in sovereignty is critical because we are talking about the most critical digital element of the agenda, and the trust is fundamental. And we have seen a lot of RFP that we have received in the different geography in Europe that our VCP partners have received because they are trusted. And it's not trusted cloud, it's the trust of the confidence of you can deliver a comprehensive story and you can be the front end for this overall story. Mm. The third pillar is we are not talking about a PowerPoint roadmap. We are talking about what exists today, what is already deployed. We are talking about VCF. We are talking about the additional security and development framework. We are talking about Tanzu. It's existing, it's concrete, it's solid. We have this foundation in place. And the fourth, which is critical for the transition and migration, it's a multi-cloud story, included hybrid, meaning that each of this level of security can connect under control of the client policy to the legacy system. So there is no rewriting. It's not a new word. It's a way of transitioning because the cost of migration are huge. And if you can make it simple, but keeping the control, it's a serious advantage that our competitors don't have. So we have this attribute, we have more, but these four, I wanted to stress according to the summary you did, Guy, on the overall picture, because it's concrete and it's a real opportunity that we can enjoy now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, right? The Cloud Act has been long kind of thought of and I believe disputed in Congress. They've been trying to get it reversed so they can do more business with European entities. But the laws are always going to change. The regulatory controls are always going to change. And no one is better placed to be able to deliver the necessary jurisdictional controls, which negate things like Cloud Act, for your national interest and your customers' national interest than a sovereign cloud partner in that nation. And like you said, a trusted thing is so important. I mean, one of the things I hear very much from our customers who work with our cloud providers, it's having the relationship with the cloud provider. You don't get those relationships necessarily with hyperscale. You've got someone to call, you've got someone to talk about, you've got someone who understands your business. And if the cloud provider is providing sovereign managed services like data classification, assessments and compliance and things like that, then they're going to know even more about your business and be able to help you, onboard faster into that sovereign environment. And you're absolutely right as well, that multi-cloud ready, VMware's always had this story. We've always been uniquely positioned with this. A huge amount of enterprise workloads are based on vSphere. The fastest migration path from vSphere is to vSphere with least risk. And if that vSphere environment is in a dedicated, confidential environment that is sovereign within a sovereign cloud provider, then that's an easy onboarding route for you to start achieving your sovereign goals as a customer. And the technology foundation, I mean, you mentioned VCF, Tanzu, There's things like IDS, IPS, network security. We've got working with ecosystem providers now to fill in some of the gaps and provide more comprehensive services. So things like Fortanix key management services, Cloudian object storage and secure object storage, Veeam data backup and data protection, as well as all of our disaster recovery portfolio and cloud portfolio in general. So, cloud providers already have access to all of this under the rental contracts they have with VMware. So it's actually implied in what you're doing today. Now, the uplift for a cloud provider to become a sovereign cloud provider is the self-attestation to the guidelines around sovereign cloud and the key principles that VMware has defined. And not every cloud provider is going to be able to meet those. But certainly for our cloud providers out there who are delivering sovereign services today, then have a look at the sovereign cloud webpage on our cloudsolutions.vmware.com webpage, and that will give you guidance on how to look at onboarding potentially to becoming a VMware sovereign cloud provider.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all of these components in mind, my advice is don't wait RFP. Engage in your country with the three main segments that we have identified. The first one is the government, when it goes to a very high potential of investment for the restricted data, which are not on the cloud today. And they need to modernize, they need to improve security, they need to prepare for resiliency. All of these drivers are concrete. So this is a good discussion to engage as well for public sectors when you have opportunities to engage with your existing trusted relationship on how we can move from a couple of percent that we have seen on the cloud adoption today to a significant move to cloud as is expected by the overall government and European Commission. So this is a great opportunity to help our public sector's clients to engage and adopt with control of their data. And the third category is our finance, insurance, critical health activity and critical infrastructure. We can also visit these clients to engage in a more concrete way this requirement of compliance and regulation, the move to cloud in a controlled way and integrated. The risk of silo, the risk of very specific, what we have called opportunistic solution, does not work for the end state, which is an integrated architecture and an integrated strategy for the whole set of data for the company. So you have the capacity to engage without waiting any solicitation, any RFP, and develop great business. It's an $8 billion opportunity for Europe.
Yeah, you mentioned that last point's actually spot on. And if there's one thing the pandemic has shown us is that governments and health entities, rushed to create, COVID application passports, COVID testing, et cetera, and a lot of these things were created in silos because the other entities which held all the data didn't have this sovereign principles and sovereign guidance around how to share that data and share it securely. So, you end up with silos that may do a point task, but in the long strategic run are really not going to be much use at all, and will end up probably getting reintegrated back into something later on. So it's really a great opportunity to start addressing and we have to, as our own individual nations, you in France, me in Great Britain, it's in our national interest to grow our economies, and data is the new economy. Governments and all sorts of other entities need to be looking at their data and understanding how they can share their data potentially in other secure ways to monetize that data and really just develop the national economy in the national interest. I think a lot of this closely aligns to environmental, social, and governance as well. We see a lot of sovereign cloud bids coming from government entities where there are some environmental requirements in there now. There are some social values, there are governance requirements. So sovereign cloud providers need to think about the whole spectrum, not just about delivering, what we've talked about today, but also what are they doing for the environment? How is their cloud and their data centers helping with sustainability? What are they doing to drive social awareness, social value, social growth within their sovereign nation? And governance being obviously the sovereignty play is around the compliance, classification, security, and jurisdictional control.
The last point I want to add on this very concrete list you summarized very well is the fact that the life cycle of the investment for data services is far longer than the specific contract for a particular choice of technology at a point in time. So what does that mean? It means that we need to take care not to recreate new legacy and a new tech debt. For those, as I've been with gray hair, who have been on mainframe for long, we are very pleased to say cloud is a new area and the debt was from the past, and now we are talking about modern investment. We need to take care because the level of investment on data services, on this data economy, data-driven transformation is clearly a huge set of investment for data with control, because data is becoming the asset of the company, and sovereignty is critical for this huge criticality of the data as a core element of the business strategy, whatever the business is, and with the notion of timeline, which is this data element and the services around this data will be for 10, 20 years, while a contract with a specific hyperscaler or whoever will be for a period of time of a contract. And we need to prepare this holistic view, but also this resiliency. This is why interoperability and portability are also critical in this story, because our clients are very, very concerned about not recreating a new tech debt. It's a huge journey of the e-economy. We need to be prepared and educate our clients that we are working for long. And this is, without looking, a unique opportunity that we have to deliver the VMware value proposition with your involvement as trusted partner.
Yeah. Laurent, that's a great point to finish up on. I think absolutely 100% what you've just said is so important. And hopefully, the presentation so far today has given a little bit more guidance on, what sovereign is, what VMware means when we say sovereign cloud, and how VMware differentiates with a kind of multi-cloud sovereign architectural portfolio and position. So I look forward to more chats with you as we evolve the program, as we will be, I'm sure. But for now, Laurent, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and a real lesson for me again in sovereign cloud. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.
You too.